Welcome back for another edition of Cattle Chatter. I'm Susan Littlefield. Joining us, Brad Kooima with Kooima Kooima Varilek out of Sioux Center, Iowa. And fragile, I feel like we need to bubble wrap maybe a little bit of this market this week as we look at what's happening in the trade and the drop we've seen once again. How close to the knife are we in the countryside? And really, what's going on in the Packer world? As Brad, let's talk first about the fact that this is a very fragile market at this point.
100%. And I'm reminded of it, especially here what we saw develop over the last 2.5 or 3 weeks or so. By the way, thanks a lot for having me on, Susan. I enjoy this a lot. There is such a fine line. And if you don't believe it, then you didn't walk through the last 3 weeks. I could be a real sarcastic smart aleck, which I have a tendency to be anyway, and say, so what's different today than 3 weeks ago? Well, what's different is I can't get 226, and I was getting over 240. What's different is the Packers making lots of money now, and before that he probably was maybe not making much, if anything at all. Poor guys. And I don't think hamburgers any cheaper at the grocery store. So the market is fragile. There's a fine line between having leverage and not having leverage, and it feels to me like all of a sudden now we've ducked our head underwater here, and I'm a little worried. What we're having is the relapse of the reality of what you and I talked about this on the show. We heard it over and over as we went through late summer and fall. The cost of feeder cattle, in a lot of people's opinion, was extremely high, to the point where it was influencing their marketing decision. And what I mean by that is they were making a conscious decision. I'm going to feed what I got and make it bigger because I can't afford the break evens that if I sell these and buy the replacements. So, not to blame just the feeder here, and it's reality. You also had a Packer that was encouraging that. I mean, there's no discount for big cattle. In fact, the bigger the better. They pay a premium for a big steer, because when you got short supply, they're trying to still get pounds, right? So now I feel like we're going like, oh shucks, I got cattle for sale that I wished I'd have sold 2 weeks ago or a month ago. You got a Packer that has limited needs here, shorter kill time. There's a couple of Packers that are dark tomorrow that we all would recognize their names. Thanksgiving holiday coming up, also a short week with that. But a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. The seasonal tendency of the market, Susan, is a little different on the other side of Thanksgiving. But right now, feels like we're like the duck on the water, where it looks like everything's fine, but actually he's really paddling his little rear end off to try to stay above water.
So how short, let's say the South, for example, how short are they at the moment?
Well, that's kind of a comforting thing here. I apologize.
You're good.
Because the overall numbers are still very tight, and you can't change it. No rhetoric out of Washington, D.C. is going to change that. And even if the border would open with Mexico, giving you a lot to edit today. Even if the border would open with Mexico tomorrow, it's not going to change the supply of fat cattle for the next while, the next months, 150 to 180 days even. So that's going to help. And I think that'll ultimately keep this thing from getting any, really, really nasty, as if $80 break in the feeder cattle isn't about enough already, right? So yeah, I'm hoping that if we can get to that time frame of, say, like the second full week of December, that we're cleaned up a little bit with this little bit of a weight issue we got here in the north, and that the south we go, well, we still don't have any cattle. I can tell you 3 different incidences of cattle that I know of. Some of them are my own, that have been sold and are getting exported clear to Texas or clear to Colorado. In one case, down to Kansas, and I'm up in the northwest corner of Iowa. So that's not negative. That's an indication just how tight things are down there. So hopefully, get off the windowsill here, and hopefully we'll get through this deal. But for a minute here, it doesn't feel good to me.
Are we going to start to see an influx, though? I mean, I know that 75-year low on these cattle numbers, but are we going to see an influx normally this time of year? Those ballers headed to feedlots?
I think there's a lot of them for sale yet. Yeah, I think particularly across the north, like the Dakotas, for instance. Mm-hmm. Those guys, fortunately for them, they had a pretty good year with a lot of rain, so they got a lot of grass, got a lot of feed. Market's good. Every pound you make them bigger, is worth $4 a pound or so, right? So I think that there's plenty of calves to come here. It'll be curious too to see whether now, like yesterday at one of the popular sales, Bassett, Nebraska, they got great cattle there, but boy, they were not much cheaper there at all. If anything, I'd say they were higher. But the calf market's been all over the place. I can see $30, $100 differences in the same weight class of calves from one place to another. It might be an interesting day today to go to a sale barn, with feeder cattle futures down $5.50 right now. Could be a little softer, I would guess, today.
All right. So what about that cash? You made a statement. It's like catching a falling piano.
when it turns, it takes no prisoners.
Yeah.
I've got about 50 or 60 different notes stuck up here under my desk here, but one of them right over here is up on the stairs down on the elevator, and which is a commodity broker's way of saying it goes up more gradually, but when it goes down, it has a tendency to go down much faster than it goes up, and you're seeing that. This having cash market change $5 a week and $7 a week is nuts, but that's what's happening. So yesterday I sold some cattle here for $226. I can't get it today. $226 is quite a bit lower than last week, beginning of the week. We'll see what the South does. They trying to ask 230 or more, but I would be surprised if they get it. I don't know where the cash is going to catch, but it feels to me like when you have sharply lower futures, you've got a feedlot that's not very confident, and if they're hedgers, they're a little easier to move to because where December cattle are priced, 222. So I wish I was more fun to talk to and talk with today, but kind of a Debbie Downer deal here today, but it's the reality of how I feel.
Well, then the reason I'm asking this, because you alluded to it just a little bit ago towards the beginning of this program, we've got to get past Thanksgiving. Once we get past Thanksgiving, typical is what we see.
100%. I mean, this would be actually quite average. I've got three older brothers. Okay, so one of them, the seasonal is to buy feeder cattle on his birthday. His birthday's in the third week of April. The other seasonal, that my personal favorite, is to buy live cattle a week before my birthday. Okay, so is that perfect? Of course not. Seasonals are problematic. There's my disclaimer, right? I mean, it's just a seasonal, but.
Right.
But if you look at a seasonal book, you'll see that by the end of the first week of December, which would be a week before my birthday, typically then we would clean up. And if you think about it, there's a reason for it. That's when we shift our focus to more of a middle meat, the tenderloins, the ribeyes, what you and I are going to cook for Christmas, right? The ribeye loins, and that demand gets better into Christmas, New Year, and actually that demand carries really almost all the way through to Super Bowl weekend, believe it or not. And so the last few years, especially since COVID, that's really, really helped the market's demand side. And so I don't know why this year would be any different. I hope it's not. And from an overall supply, just how many numbers are out there. We still got tight supply. We're looking at going into that first quarter too. So we just need to get through this deal, and we need to dial back the rhetoric. I would love to have given us the news on Brazil's tariffs. Just tell us that you're rolling them back, and the real gorilla in the closet, I still think, is the Mexican border. Let's just give us the date that you're going to try to open it so the market can get that built in and assimilate. And I got a feeling that when the news comes out, that we'd actually probably stabilize and rally, because then it's like, okay, now, all right, what else is left? I mean, I think then you'd have the bad news built into the marketplace. So the sooner the better for me.
So let me ask you this. Was Monday and the limit up trade we saw just a fluke in the trade for the week?
I had a hard time explaining why we did what we did. And so I guess, a bit of a feel good thing, because, hey, it looks like we are going to get the border reopened, yada, yada, and had a big up in the stock market. Trading a futures market that's a bit discounted to cash, it's always a little easier to rally it. But anymore, what a murmuration is? That's a flock of starlings, right? That they're going, and all of a sudden they go that way, and then they go that way. Unfortunately, my futures market is feeling like that's getting to be more and more like that, and that's influenced by these HFT and algorithms, and the AI type trading that the market seems to just finally just go until it runs out of the limit deal. But I don't know. I'm afraid that today's action is more reality based for me, but hopefully it doesn't last too much longer, and we can catch here soon.
Only because I have to ask, because you always have a unique way of answering this. The president makes the comments that now we need to investigate the Packers because he's convinced that's the reason why our beef prices are so high at the counter. as a political pause. I mean, I'm just curious
No,
on
no,
how you see this all
I
working
just want,
together.
I want to, no, it's a great question. It's a fair question. I'd love to answer the question. I just got to make sure I'm trying to do this politely a little bit.
I know.
The function of the market's function is to go to a price high enough where we slow demand or we make more of it. I don't care if you're talking about cocoa, coffee, corn, cattle, whatever it is. Okay. Or to go to a price low enough where we finally slow down production or increase the amount of demand for it. It's not my fault that Costco's charging more than you like for ribeyes. I'm a cattle feeder. It's not my fault. It's not that cow calf guy in Western Nebraska's fault that hamburger cost $8. He's walked this whole thing back here some. He's walked it back, but we should have never been here. My goodness. I mean, all that's changed is you've got Packer now that has all the margin. Yeah. Am I a proponent? Anybody that knows who I am knows that I have fought fiercely for price discovery and transparency at every level that I can be at, all the way up to NCBA levels. And am I a fan of the big fours oligopoly that they've got? Of course not. But guys, if you think, I hope that something happens. But if they couldn't, I mean, the three blind mice could have figured out the COVID thing, in my opinion. When you I went off the rails here, didn't I? When box beef went to $4.50 and I'm getting 85 cents for cattle, you don't think something was wrong there? I don't know. That's why I lack confidence that a DOJ thing is going to really change things after I've seen the Holcomb Fire results. Everything was okay there because of seasonal demand for Labor Day, whatever. And then the COVID thing. So yeah, I'm a little bitter, but we'll see. Maybe things will change. I'm all for transparency and price discovery, 100%.
Well, and I think it goes to the chasing of the headlines and the algorithms that we see to continue this part.
No doubt in my mind that still is part of a factor here, that the human element has been diluted to the point where without the pit to take some of that information, go like, well, wait a minute, that's not a big deal. Like the Argentina beef thing, that little dab. I mean, in the old days when we had a pit, that had got discounted like, well, 80,000 pounds. So what? We'd have got on down the road. So sorry, I got verbose.
Nope, I had to ask him because I had some cattle guys asking me earlier this week to ask you.
No, I get pretty fired up about that stuff. So sorry.
What's the best way for folks to get a hold of you guys?
We have a website, kkvtrading.com, but it's pretty average. How about you call us? 712-722-0023.
All right. That is another edition of Cattle Chatter. Quick side note, Cattle Chatter will be on the road next week at the National Association of Farm Broadcasting Convention in Kansas City. We'll be talking to Brad. Unfortunately, not in person, but it'll still be here. And that, folks, another edition of Cattle Chatter.
The views and opinions of this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers. There is substantial risk of loss in trading futures and options, which you should carefully consider prior to trading.